South African stories have travelled as far or turned as sharply as Eskom's. For nearly 2 decades, the words load shedding became shorthand for dysfunction and frustration and decline. But today, the unthinkable has happened. South Africa's lights are on permanently. Behind that turnaround is a leadership team that just refused to accept failure. Chair Mteto Nyati, CEO Dan Marokane, who recently was awarded the Sunday Times Business Leader of the Year award, a great honor, and head of generation Becky Nkomalo, who together engineered one of the most improbable corporate recoveries in our country's democratic history, from a 340 billion rand debt burden to a 24 billion rand pre-tax profit, from 51% energy availability factors to over 70%. Eskom's rebound has not only stabilized the grid, I think it's restored a measure of hope in the idea of a capable South African state-owned enterprise. And keeping the lights on, I think, is only the beginning, though, with a 9.5 gigawatt coal capacity set to retire by 2030. We've got new gas and transmission delays looming and an open electricity market on the horizon. I think the next phase is arguably even harder. But keeping Eskom relevant in a liberalized, decarbonizing economy is what my next guest is focused on. I'm Michael Avery, and this is Business Talk. Today, we unpack the remarkable turnaround of Eskom with Eskom Chair Mteto Nyati. Mteto, welcome and congratulations. You've led some of South Africa's most iconic companies, from MTN and Microsoft to Ultron and now Eskom. Looking back, what have been the most defining moments in your leadership journey, and how have they shaped the way that you've approached this particular challenge?
Michael, thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be representing Eskom in this podcast. And once again, I want to echo you. I want to congratulate Dan Marokane for a well-deserved recognition by the Sunday Times, being the businessman of the year. To go to your question, I would say when I look back, one of the key turning points for me was when I left South Africa. I was still working for IBM at the time. And when IBM saw some of the work that I was doing here in South Africa, they asked me, can you go and replicate this across our markets, Europe, Middle East, Africa? And at the time I was going to be based in Paris, France. And that was, although I took that assignment, but I was scared because I did not know, whether I could live up to the task and operating in an environment where I've never operated or worked abroad before.
And how was your French?
My French was zero. But the good thing is that there was really no need for the French, because the people that had been assembled at the headquarters in Paris were coming from different countries, were some of the best people from the different countries to drive the strategy of the company across the entire geography, Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So I was, I go in there, and when I got, after less than a year being in there, got promoted, that's, to me, sent me a message about South Africa, about how sometimes we undermine what we have. We always in an environment where you are always being told, also, you've got what you've got because of your color, because of BEE, and some of that can actually, you end up believing it when in reality it's actually not the case, and operating an environment where you are competing with the best and being able to outperform people in those environments. And it gave me a very good sense of what is it that I'm able to bring to the party. And I also learned a lot in that environment around working across cultures, because I was not just in France, I was working Germany, Italy, UK, Africa. That gave me a very good sense of managing across culture. And this is where IBM decided to make a decision to nominate me for a Yale Well Fellow program, where 10,000 people were competing for 18 slots, and I ended up being able to get into that. So that exercise, and lastly, the Yale program, which was ready to say, we identify people who are in mid-careers, and we think that these people may have an impact on the world. We want to influence them so that whatever leadership role that they take in the future, they pay attention to, making a positive impact to the world, not just focusing on profits, and that has shaped me throughout that program from Yale.
It's something that really has been core. I mean, I read Betting on a Darkie. I've interviewed you with your various hats on, and it's something that you've never changed. It's always very much at the core of who Mteto Nyati is as a leader. And that's why I think, when you were appointed, I think I certainly celebrate, and many did, because, the organization needed that kind of very self-aware leadership, very humble, very reflective leadership, and principled leadership, as we know as well. And you mentioned BEE. I think we're still grappling with this in South Africa. What does it mean? And I think, sadly, because there have been some cases of fronting, some instances where it's used as a fig leaf for corruption, that the good instances are then lumped all together. And so we conflate all of these things. And ultimately, what we're all trying to do is normalize what was a very abnormal society where people didn't have access to old school time networks, the ability to build entrepreneurial empires. And so how do you do that? How do you normalize South African society? And it's been a big thread through your career, Mteto, transformation. So what does successful transformation look like to you in practice? And what were the non-negotiables for making it stick inside a complex organization like Eskom when you arrived? And you must have found an organization that was riven with self-doubt, not the kind of confidence that enabled you when you left the country to go to France for IBM.
Yeah, for me, again, it is very important that we understand what transformation means. It means so many things to so many people, and I try to simplify it for myself, to say that transformation is really about making sure that the organization that you're working for, right, is the organization living up to its purpose. The purpose of Eskom is to deliver affordable electricity. That is what it should always be available all the time, right? And our purpose is very clear. We're saying that we're powering growth sustainably. Powering growth sustainably. But as you can see, if you look over the last 15 years, that's not what we have been doing. We have not been living our purpose. So the key in all of this, how do we change ourselves so that we can be able to fulfill what is expected of us, of what we have defined ourselves to be, meaning delivering that growth. And in this case, we had so much, if I can narrow it down to lack of discipline. Lack of discipline. This is an engineering company. It's an engineering firm, and an engineering company needs to follow certain standard operating procedures. You need to check the temperature when you have to need to check it. Check the pressure. You have to change things, oil after so many hours of running, that kind of thing. You need to change the filter. There is discipline. And unfortunately, if we've got poor leadership at all levels, poor leaders, people are not paying attention to the things that matter. And these are the people who set the tone. The tone is set from the top. They set the tone, and people look, and when they are not paying attention to the things that need to be paid attention to, and then the standards fall. So I always say that we had instances where leaders were not leading, managers were not managing, and you end up with chaos. So it manifests itself in many, many ways. You end up with corruption taking its root, having people that are not following the right procedures, safety, it got thrown out of the window. You need to bring back that discipline, and it comes from leadership. Starting from the top, having a board that has a clear understanding of where it needs to be taking this organization, and working with management that focus on what matters. And what matters really in all of these things is about people, creating a great environment for the people to do their best work, and creating a high performance culture. But what it means is that you cannot treat people the same. You need to be differentiation. And no, everybody is going to be getting 5% increase. No. If you are not performing, you are not going to be getting anything. If you are performing, you're going to be getting maybe 9%. And that's what I mean by having differentiation. People being clear about the standards, and measuring them, bringing back that whole culture of performance-based pay. So we brought that in. We identified, appointed people like Beki Numalo, who changed a significant number of people under him. He had to change those leaders and appoint the right leaders that knew what they needed to do. The same with Dan when he came a year after we've appointed Becky. He did exactly the same, and he has now an entire leadership team that is diverse, that is fit for the future that we are going to be building for Eskom, not for the past. We have got a future which is a green future, a future that is a clean energy future, a future where there's competition. So we need leaders that are going to be able to operate within that environment. That's what he has been able to put together.
And I think that really speaks to the thinking behind the Generation Recovery Plan, which was this focus on the 6 worst performing power stations, and to bring the decision making all the way and the operational accountability right down to the power station level, and then to manage that and to engender accountability for decision making on that level. I think,
accountability is so.
Yeah. One of the less visible parts of this turnaround has, I think, been culture. And you've often spoken, and you've spoken before, about moving Eskom away from fear and blame, which must have been very pervasive, towards accountability and pride. But what did it take to change that mindset? And how are you protecting that progress now that morale has started to recover, as I'm sure it no doubt has, given the performance?
Look, for me, leadership matters. Leadership matters. It is the leaders that set the tone. It's the leaders, their values. You can have the values on the wall, but it's the values that are being role modeled by the leaders that then set the tone, and people look at it. And it is the appointment of the leaders. When we appointed them, we first had to look at what are the challenges that this organization is facing, and where are we also taking this organization. So he had to address the current challenges, but also be able to prepare the organization for the future. And when we look at all of this thing, we realize that a number of leaders have one of these 3 things. They either have the head, a good head, they either have a good heart, or they have a good hands, good pair of hands. And unfortunately, in this case, having a great head just would not cut it. You had to have all 3 of these things, and we needed to find a leader that had that, and Dan has it. He's got a big heart, but at the same time, he got a great mind. He understands, analyzes things, and he works with other people. It's not all about me. It's about my job as a leader is to empower. My job as a leader is to support and serve the people that are working under me. My job as a leader is to go to the board to fight for my people, to make sure that that's what he does. But at the same time, the other thing that he does is to hold those people accountable. Tough love, very, very tough love. But when it's required, he's able to roll up his sleeves and do the hard work. So it's those three things that were required. And what you start to see throughout the organization, the kind of leaders that have been appointed, what he has appointed, what Becky has done below himself as well, is the kind of thing. And these are the people who create the culture. The culture. We've always had the values of excellence in Eskom. We've always had the value of integrity. We've always had the values of zero harm, a customer service. But where is customer service when you're having load shedding? There's no customer. When you have got corruption, where's integrity there? So values alone, it means nothing. You need people who are going to be making sure that you demonstrate those values. You appoint people based on those values. You fire people based on those values, and everything that is being done needs to be linked back to those values. When we're doing training programs within the company, like now what Dan has done, there used to be a leadership development center in Eskom, which unfortunately some people with their great minds decided to shut down and just make it, use it as offices. He has made a decision, no, this is an important asset. That's where we need to be creating and making sure that people are aligned. They have got this one culture in it. Our junior managers are being trained there. Middle managers are now being trained there. Senior managers are being trained there across all aspects of the business. It could be about performance management. It could be really about systems thinking, because we're living in a world where we now can understand everything is connected to everything else. You need to understand how all of these things are fitting together. And that's the kind of training and drive that we are embedding in the organization, so that this company must not depend on Mteto, must not depend on Dan. It must function even when these people are out there. That's making sure that you embed it through culture. And this is the drive that he is doing then at this time.
That's very much that stewardship mindset that you speak to so often, Mteto, that when you're a leader, you're really just a steward of an asset for a particular period of time. And, you're eventually going to hand it over to someone else. And you want to ensure that you've built that institutional strength. Equally, we're all stewards of the planet. And so we realize we've got to move to a more sustainable future. But again, being mindful of our context in South Africa, a context that needs energy. We need competitively priced energy to support industrial-led growth, because we have record high unemployment. And these are the things, these are the tensions. But you mentioned the future. And as someone who's got a tech background, you must think of things like AI and data and predictive analytics, and look at where the world is heading and say, right, we've got to be thinking about this. And they've become central to how utilities, I think, around the world are managing their grids. Has Eskom embraced any of these technologies to improve reliability or maybe anticipate failures before they happen?
Yes, for sure. I mean, Eskom has always been a great company, but somehow we moved in the wrong direction. But we've got really, really good, smart people in this organization. There is no other energy company on the continent that has got the kind of people that we have. And unfortunately, when we arrived here, they had forgotten about that. We needed to remind them how good they are, how great they are. When they're now looking at them, they are moving with confidence. They have reconnected with who they are, which is a good thing. And these people, they are looking at all sorts of things. And one of it is definitely is AI. AI has got to be part of our future. The person that we have brought in to head our information technology unit, his name is Len de Villiers. And Len, many people would know him for his impact that he has had in the financial services sector of this country. Where he has been a CIO at ABSA, he has been a chief information officer at Nedbank. He has done some of the most difficult, complex, but highly created enabling environments for those businesses in order for them to be globally competitive. And we decided to bring Len into this environment. more for making sure that we remain relevant, we are open, and how do we use technology in order for us to compete. When we look at the size of our business, next challenge, Mike, now, as you probably know, is no longer about the energy security. All of that is behind us. We are. I'm sure we are going to continue to have energy being available in our country from Eskom. Our next challenge is to make sure that it is affordable. So we have to take out the cost from the system. We have given Dan and his team very, very clear targets in terms of taking out costs from the base. And the targets over the next 5 years, 112 billion rand. That's a huge amount of cost to take out, And they've got target year after year. We need to meet every end of the year. You have to take out this thing. And if you're not embracing technology, there is no way that he's going to be able to get there, So that's why AI is an important part of that. It's going to be significantly a part of that. If you look at the way we have dealt with corruption, we have quietly been doing certain things on our own and not necessarily being out in the public every other day to talk about it, but identifying people that are behind some of the challenges that we're facing when it comes to corruption has been an important part of our agenda. Instead of painting everybody with the brush of them being corrupt, we know that is not true. It has never been the case. It's only a few people. Let's identify who these people are. Through the use of AI, we have been able to help drive ourselves to identify who are these people, and then putting together actions that helps us to get them out of the system, to get them to, of course, some of them are now in jail and others, So that's the work that we are doing on an ongoing basis, supported by technology. But because of huge amount of data that is required to be processed, that's why you use artificial intelligence. I'm just using that as an example. So AI or technology is such a key part of our future. And maybe the last point around technology, it's very, very important that we should not just stop using coal, because when we look at the cost of producing electricity through coal, 500 rand per megawatt hour, 500 rand. And then the next one, if you go to solar, is 2,000 rand per megawatt hour. It's like, that's a huge amount, Yes, we want to go to that future, but it's still costly. So if we want to continue remain relevant as a company and want to remain relevant as a country, we have to make sure that we produce this energy at the lowest possible cost. The one that is the lowest now is nuclear. It's 107 rand per megawatt hour to run a nuclear power station. So that's the cheapest. Then followed by coal. Then followed by solar and wind. That's 2,000. And then significantly more, 6,000 rand when you start to use diesel. 6,000 rand. Yeah. So you can see it is so important that we remain with coal for as long as possible to make our country to be globally competitive. But we cannot continue to be polluting the environment. So we have to use our great technical resources, our research and development guys, our engineers, to figure out how do we minimize and eliminate some of these emissions, So that's the focus that we are having, both at making sure that the coal that we are using is clean coal, or we're reducing and minimizing the emissions to the environment. So if we do that, we will be able to use coal for as long as possible.
Do you think potentially, given Eskom's challenges in the past, there was a lack of attention paid to that particular area in terms of research and development?
or long number. We should have done this thing when I started like a few years ago. It should have been a core element of what we do. We don't always have to reinvent things, to invent things here. Other countries have done some of these things. So we can go and learn from China. How are they doing it? Because a significant percentage of the generation capacity in China is coal. Yes, they're aggressive on renewables, but they're still aggressive on coal. But they've come up with technology, so we can learn from them. But also, we've got smart people here. We also can come up with ways of minimizing these emissions.
What do you see now as Eskom's role as the market is opening, as we, the ERA was signed earlier this year, probably the biggest change to the way the market is regulated and structured since it first started in South Africa. It really is that big. We've got independent power producers. We've got the unbundling of Eskom, a much more open playing field, as you say. And you mentioned the creation of Eskom Green. So that it signals a fundamental shift in how the utility sees its own future, not just as a generator, but also as an enabler of cleaner, competitive energy in the ecosystem. So what do you see as your role now as Eskom in this newly configured and being configured energy landscape?
Look, I think a number of people would wish that Eskom would be gone, and possibly because of how we have really not lived up to our purpose. We have disappointed South Africa many times. But I think those wishes are really ill-informed, because if you take Eskom out of the equation, we would be having we are producing close to 85% of the energy of this country today. It's going to take for a long time to have anybody coming to anywhere close to that. You can bring, unfortunately, when you bring all of these private companies that are bringing renewables, most of that is not dispatchable, meaning it is dependent on the weather. So our role, we have made it very clear, we are going to provide base load, something that is always going to be there regardless of the circumstance. We are going to be, that means being very, very strong in nuclear, being very strong when it comes to coal, but making sure that the coal is clean, and being able to use gas, as a form of a transition as we move into renewables, and participating in renewables. But you cannot run, if you see the economy of Germany today, if you go to any business, what they are looking for business in any environment, policy certainty. That's what they're looking for. The other thing is certainty around the prices of things, right? Where in Germany today, unfortunately, depending on the weather, the price of electricity can be as high as 10 times or can come down. How do you plan in that environment? The reason why Germany has lost its competitiveness, it used to be one of the leading countries. It's unfortunate some of the blunders that they have made when it comes to their transition into this space. Now, we're starting to see things are being reversed a bit because they moved. We cannot make that mistake. We have to stay the route. We have to learn from what some of the mistakes that have been made by some of these countries. So we will provide, as Eskom, base load to South Africa, and also clean energy to South Africa. That's the space that we have defined for ourselves.
And we know gas is an important component of that, although we don't have our own gas, much of it in Mozambique. And there's a lot of talk around the looming gas cliff and what's going to happen. What is your sense on what we need to do in order to ensure that, we've got gas when you don't have the variable renewables that are maybe connected to battery energy storage, and that's run out, and then you don't have baseload. Gas is a key if you look at the IRP as well. What's your sense around the urgency with which needs to happen to get our gas component of the energy mix right?
The good thing is that I know everybody is worried, but the good thing is that the right people have seen all of this thing. It's not like a surprise, and they've been working on this, and different discussions are being had with the different countries that can be able to supply us with the gas that we're looking for. And if you look again broadly, it's even better now that we're having all of these discussions with the US on the trade front, and I have no doubt that gas is possibly part of those discussions, and of course the Middle East is also another some of the countries or the regions that can provide us. Discussions have always been had with those countries. So I have no doubt that the right people are looking into this thing, and we will be able to see how we cannot end up with a problem where we do not have the gas that we need as a country.
Now, you've been called in at moments of crisis throughout your career. I mean, whether it was turning Ultron around, and I recall at the time you're taking over from the Fenters and you took all of the senior leadership away and a bit of a Bosbarat, and it was a chance for you to just sort the wheat from the chaff, see who's with you from a values and a culture perspective. What's your leadership philosophy when the situation feels existential and you come in and things look hopeless? How do you balance this urgency with the patience and execution with optimism? All of that, there are inherent tensions in all of that. How do you manage that, Mteto?
Look, I think what is key in all of this is to have a good understanding and between yourself as whoever is leading and your key stakeholders. In the case of Altron, for example, I was a CEO in that environment. So as a CEO, I need to have a good understanding between myself and the board. So whatever I do, I need to managing that relationship, setting the right kind of expectations, and there's in any of this, there's no such a thing like an overnight I'm going to be able to do X or Y. You need time. But once you have negotiated the fact that you need time, you should know absolutely that you do not have time. You have to move quickly in executing things, and move quickly in understanding what is the problem. What is the problem? And this is really the most central part of when you're landing in an environment like this. You have to quickly understand what's the problem. I spent almost like 2 months in Altron to figure out what the issues were, and also I came in there with already some assumptions that I've made. So you use the time to validate your assumptions and make adjustments so that you're operating from a point of accurate information. And you're using that time to gain the support and listen to people. Because whatever strategy you come up with, Michael, it needs to be a strategy that people on the ground can connect with. Because if you have to create a strategy and then go and sell it, it's a waste of time. When you have a strategy, it must be a strategy that people embrace immediately. And they only do that if they were part of co-creating the strategy, So that's the key. You reduce the time of buy-in and or pushing back by creating the space for people to co-create stuff with you, And so that's what we did. We compressed that in Eskom. We had to do that. It's like 1 month. Things that generally you have to, we compress that. At the time, I was not the chair of the board. I was the chair of the committee responsible for operations. It was a new committee that was set up. It's called Business Operation Performance Committee of the board. I was chairing that committee. So we're engaging with power station general managers, engaging with people, engaging with the leadership in Eskom at the top, visiting power stations quickly so that we can get to understand is the problem defined correctly here? And we came to the conclusion that the problem actually, the problem statement was a wrong problem statement. We're saying that we've got these old power stations that we need to retire. Don't throw good money after bad. So we should not continuously allow the private sector to come up with renewable energy and accelerate that. And then that was how the whole problem was being crafted. And we realized, actually, for me, even from outside, like, I'm an engineer, I know there's no such a thing as an old anything, you know, as long as you're taking care of your machine, you know, replacing this and replacing that, it will continue to serve you for a very, very long time. So there's no such a thing. How do we come to a conclusion that these things are old and we need to retire them? It makes no sense, but you have to validate that. Listening to people on the ground, people are saying, this is crazy. There's no such a thing. If we do this and do that, we should be able to get out of this problem. So then you validate it, then you come up with a plan that is talking to, in fact, is a plan that's coming from the ground up, of course, supported by you. So you don't have to even sell anything because it's actually their plan, you know. And they are so keen to show you that this plan works. So there's internal motivation for people to demonstrate to you that this kind of thing works. So it is that approach of really getting there, getting to understand what the problem is. In the process of getting to understand, you are creating that support behind your strategy. But then the next thing is to make sure that you execute. Right leaders to execute the plan. Do you have the right leaders? Sometimes you have, sometimes you don't. So we'll bring people from external. But in the case of Eskom, we had the leader as in Becky for generation. But overall, we did not have a leader. We managed to go and get Dan to do. And, you know, and the next thing, which is probably the most difficult thing, many people get so bored because it is boring. You know, it's, this thing of execution. Holding people accountable every week. Where are we? You know, another week. Where are we? Are we anywhere close to where? You know, monitoring. You know, they say trust, but verify. Trust, but verify. So you know, okay, you disappear for 2 years. I'm going to check you whether you have delivered in 2 years what you have promised you are going to deliver in 2 years. It's going to be too late if you only check then. You know,
I think,
yeah.
Mteto,
So
it's fascinating.
that's what I do. And you keep repeating, it does not matter which industry, you know, must get the people on your side, focus people on the clients, drive this discipline around execution, whilst creating the space for them to come up with their own ideas. All of that, it works, and it works all the time.
Now, we on the issue of the aging coal fleet, we were told as the public that these power stations are built and they have a finite life of I don't know 50, 60, 70 years if you're really pushing them. But what you're saying is if you're replacing key components and refurbishing these, we can actually extend the life of our coal fleet. Not indefinitely, because I'm sure, you know,
Yes,
structurally you'll have to redo the
yes,
concrete, but for a
yeah.
much longer period.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Because I keep hearing this 2030 thing, and I'm saying these things can go beyond 2030, you know? So, but let's make sure that we maintain them. I mean, look at what we've done in the nuclear power station, and as in Quebec, you know, it was designed 40-year life. That was their design life. But we've given them now another 20 years of life. But making sure that you replace what needs to be replaced, and now they can run for another 20 years, you know. So this notion of, no, you know, but of course they gets to a point where it becomes so expensive to run a particular technology, then it just does not make sense to do that. Then you have to you have to retire that. But if it continues to be, from a cost perspective, having such a big impact, why would you choose to get rid of that to introduce something that's going to be bringing huge cost into the equation? Why do that? Makes
Very
no sense.
interesting. In fact, I was chatting to Dr. Franz Grenier, who always thought that it was madness that we tried to decommission when we could be extending life through simple engineering interventions, and obviously doing it at a cost and safety perspective that made sense. But it shows that through this execution of the recovery plan that it is possible. Let's just lastly, Mteto, zoom out for a moment. Because you've straddled technology, you've straddled now energy, infrastructure. It feels like South Africa, we just got off the grey list. Things from an economic reform perspective are starting to move. We're starting to see positive signs at Transnet, positive progress. We've got all kinds of commissions looking at governance and corruption, crime. I was chatting to Neil Fruneman of Business Against Crime. There's a lot of work that the private sector is doing there to lend a hand. Where do you see as the greatest opportunity for transformative growth in South Africa over the next 5 years? Because it does feel like there's a new optimism, and there are green shoots that are starting to emerge around South Africa that hopefully will get out of our low growth trap.
So for me, when I look back, Mike, at what happened after the elections last year, I had such great hope for our country. When I look at the GNU setup, where you've got different parties being forced to look at the problem together. The problem is how we grow this economy, but looking from different lenses, coming from different perspectives, it's always good instead of having just one perspective, and that's a good thing, because when I look at all the time, I always embrace diversity because it helps you to come up with solutions that are much, much better than when you're looking from one angle. So that GNU setup for me was like, wow, this is fantastic for our country. But unfortunately, they have not engaged, because you need people to engage and fight around this thing to come to a solution that they can all agree. But first you need to engage, but it's like, looks like everybody's doing their own thing within this GNU. No, you are not getting the most out of GNU. You need to get the most by fighting, questioning your assumptions, different assumptions from different parties, making shifts that helps everybody to move forward, coming up with a common program that they can pay for. There's no such a thing as a common program for this GNU, So that, to me, is a potential that is still there. When I hear that the president met all of them, the leaders recently, I hope that's the direction that they are moving towards. So that's the best thing. We've got something that we can use to move things forward, and let's make sure we use it.
On that point, I couldn't agree with you more. It always felt to me like the GNU, but was it maybe a question of the time in which the parties had to negotiate this agreement? It was madness. It was 2 weeks or something like that, if memory serves, that there wasn't time to get together, have a bosberaad and say, what is our shared economic agenda? I mean, it's not an excuse, but it was just a structural issue.
We are already now in a marriage, whether you took 2 weeks or whatever, you are already all there. You make time. They must make time to have this thing. Whether it takes 2 months, it takes 3 months, it does not matter, because that investment in time, having those discussions, as difficult as they may be, coming out of that with one agenda for South Africa, that would have been a time well spent to do that. So that we do not, when someone is speaking, oh no, it's like a DA thing or an ANC thing or a PA. No, it must be South Africa Inc. agenda. So that's the potential that we still have. I hope that coming out of that, one of the key elements of that agenda would be 3 things. Making sure that each and every one of our state-owned enterprises, we've got would put people that are capable, ethical and capable leaders. Just by doing that alone, I mean, can people learn from what has been done in Eskom? Can they please just learn? The impact, how in short period of time, there's been, people refer to as a miracle. It's not a miracle. But what it is just to show the impact of having capable leaders, as in Dan and Becky, all the way down, capable people who know what they're doing. What's the potential is huge. If we can do that and do that across, the municipalities, the schools, hospitals, we do that, SOEs, the impact that action alone would have, in terms of the country. That's one. The second thing that I think, when we have this thing of a government where it's like government thinks that business is an enemy. This is crazy. Business is not the enemy. Business is the partner. How just going out, having an entire government focus on how do we make it easy for people to do business in our country. That becomes an agenda. Everybody is become obsessed with that. How do we help the small guys to be able to function all the way to just that can unlock it, because we need the small guys to address this huge unemployment problem. It can never be the big companies. It has to be the small guys, So we need to have that as an agenda. We talk about it, but it does not. It's so hard to do business in South Africa. It is difficult. It's really difficult. So the third thing would be, for me, law and order. I'm calling it law and order for a reason. There's too much lawlessness in our country. So the work that what we're seeing with the Mahlanga Commission, all what is coming out is good, because it's helping us to understand the problem. Then let's come up with the solutions, around that. So those are the three things for me. Just the three things. It would set this economy, move it into another level,
Mteto, maybe your next career should be in politics. I'd vote for you with those three things. With those three things, if we could get the GNU together, as you say, find the time now to have that talk. I look at what's going on in the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, for example. The DA haven't appointed their deputy minister since Andrew Whitfield was removed by the president for months. What's going on? It just feels absolutely rudderless at the moment. Yeah, crack their heads. Those three things, absolutely. Implement that model of meritocracy and the right people, the right ethical leadership at our SOEs and throughout South Africa, and help small business, make it an easy country in which to do business. And I know I chat to entrepreneurs daily on the show, just going to SIPSI, getting a license, getting anything done takes too long. But again, that comes down to having the right people inside those organizations. And then law and order, well, we all know what's going on with the rise of infrastructure that's just stolen and stripped, and mafias, and it's across the board, public sector, private sector, you see it everywhere. Mteto Nyati, thank you very much for your time and for what your team has accomplished. I thank you as a South African, because it's proof that with the right leadership and the execution and accountability, even South Africa's most intractable problem, which was Eskom, no one said it could be fixed, can be fixed. So well done to you and your team, and thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Michael.